What is going on, guys? On today's Friday Focus episode, we have a recording that I did for the Scale community. It was like a live call. We do those a couple times a week over there. And this one was specifically around novation agreements. It is a common topic that I would say is regularly misunderstood by investors. And if you're unfamiliar with novations, it is an alternative way to get some deals done with sellers that have like a more retail-ish property, but aren't willing to accept a wholesale price. And so it's a way that you can work with them to go through the listing process, prepare the property to go on the market, and then ultimately sell it to a retail buyer and make a little spread for yourself. And it's an interesting part of the industry because I feel like a lot of gurus kind of hold it close to their chest because they don't want to give away their quote unquote secrets. But it is a great way to make a win-win scenario with sellers that really just need some assistance but aren't necessarily distressed. And so I did this presentation for the Scale community, primarily just to make sure that everyone was doing it correctly and understood the appropriate times to kind of like pitch this and go through this with sellers. So it's a little bit of a longer Friday Focus, but in this one, I go specifically through kind of when a novation makes sense, how exactly you structure it, the documents that are needed, how to pitch it to a seller, and then kind of how to tie it all together and what your options are to actually make money from it. So it was really informational. And since we do a lot of banter on the show these days, I just thought it would be really, really good to have a heavy-hitting informational kind of episode. So hopefully you get a lot of value from this one. I would love to know your thoughts on this kind of show. So if you could send me a DM on Instagram at Mike_invest and just give me either a yay or nay. All feedback is great. And besides that, I hope you guys get a ton out of this one. So thanks for listening, everybody, and enjoy this call that we did for the Scale community around novation agreements.
I would like to start off with a quote. So you can have everything you want in life if you help other people get what they want. And I felt like this was a pretty good quote for novations because when it comes to these, a lot of the time, I feel like people use this novation concept to try and like make more money out of these deals, when in reality, what it should be is a way for you to get the seller more like something that's closer to what they want, right? Typically, it's a little bit more money. It's a different kind of transaction. It's not as much time pressure, right? And so I think viewing these going in from a like growth mindset or like a mutually beneficial mindset is really, really important, because otherwise what can happen is if these always become not about what the other person wants, but what you want, novations can tread on that ethical timeline really quickly because it can turn into, I'm robbing grandma because of her ignorance. Okay. Especially doing these, I would say even more so than wholesale, because at least with wholesale, you're providing you're putting up the cash, you're taking a vested interest in the property. With novations, there's a lot of room for shady stuff to happen if you're not careful. I also think that's one of the reasons they've gotten kind of popular is because people are able to squeeze more money out of suckers. And unfortunately, that's a really common thing in our industry, right? So first off, what is a novation? It's a way to make money. Is it a way to make money on shitty opportunities? No, it's not that. Is it a backup plan when negotiating a wholesale price starts to get challenging? No, right? Make sure that you don't use it as like a fallback for things. It's an opportunity to get a seller a higher price when the wholesale fast cash offer doesn't make sense. Okay, so at its fundamental core, that's what it is. But in a legal sense, what a novation actually is, so you understand this. But this is kind of a mouthful. But it's a legal process where an existing contract or a party is replaced with a new one, right? And so it essentially nullifies the original agreement, and both of the parties in the original agreement need to agree to allow this new contract to overtake the existing one. And it's important to understand this so you know what's actually happening, right? We all understand the concept of an assignment. We've all wholesale deals. An assignment is when you take the rights to your contract and you give it to somebody else. With a novation, basically both you and the seller are agreeing to have an entirely new agreement overtake yours. And the arrangements of that and how you get basically compensated are agreed to beforehand, right? And so that's important because you need to understand that all of the original safeties and your dropout clauses and everything that you have in that original PSA no longer apply to you once you do the novation, right? So novations make sense when a property is less than retail ready, but is too high, but the price is too tight to flip or wholesale it. if you're going to get burned on the transaction cost and lending costs, if you do a wholesale or a flip, a novation could be a good candidate for that, especially if it's a fixer upper, but it's not like crazy out of control. You can do novations on like heavy fixer upper deals. Basically, you're just going to be selling it to a more retail fix and flipper, right? And this is something that is a common, I would say, misnomer with this is people always think you have to have like a retail ready property to do these. If the seller's desire is to maximize the money they can get for the property and they don't have a timeline, but the property is a major fixer-upper, you can do a novation for those. You can take the fixer-upper property, help them with selling it on the market to people that would be outside of your buyer's list because they're retail, realtor using fix and flippers. Okay. The seller has time and flexibility in what they're doing, right? If they are on a quick timeline, novation is not going to be an option. If they have a super strict, like I need to be able to sell and stay in the home and, have all this stuff happen beforehand, novation is not going to be a good option. That's your job as a direct buyer / wholesaler to deal with those kind of situations, right? There's a mutual exchange of value in helping the seller get top dollar. Keyword being the mutual exchange, right? If it's just value for you, probably not the best fit. That's where you're going to cross into the ethical dilemma there. And then lastly, the selfish one is if you have time and money available to assist the seller in their needs. Don't let the desire or the drive or the opportunity with novations to restrict your own business cash flow needs, right? If you're in a situation where you literally are not going to be able to pay your bills next month, but you have a deal that you can wholesale for $7,000 or you can novate it for $30,000, it's going to take you 6 months. You should wholesale that deal for $7,000 so you can pay your bills, right? Don't do stupid stuff to try and make more future money, right? Make sure that you're addressing your now needs as opposed to your future needs. And so going through the documents that are required for this process, I just have some snippets from like one of our more recent ones that we've done, just so you can see like the important pieces of it. And so the first document that you need is a purchase and sale with the seller. It's outlined the arrangement between you and the seller. The key points in this are we have the assignability and novation clause, which basically gives you the right to novate this agreement to a third-party purchaser, right? You should definitely have this conversation. Don't just like surprise them with it. But this is outside of our normal PSA. We have a specific PSA for this that is on the drive, right? And then in that PSA, you should also have the specific terms of what you were going to do when you go and you find this third-party purchaser. So this is one that we did recently. And so it just says we will be entitled to $10,000 as a commission to be paid out of the settlement statement at closing, regardless of the sales price of the property, right? And after closing costs are accounted for, all construction costs reimbursed through Elevate Spokane. That's our little entity. Excess funds above that amount due to the seller and $10,000 to Elevate Spokane will be split 50-50. And so I go through at the end of it, like the kind of different ways you can structure these to make profit. And this one, we're doing a fixed fee, and then any additional profit above that, after all costs are recovered, we're splitting 50-50 with the seller. All right.
So these contracts are specific to the properties with that, those numbers and verbiage?
Correct. Yeah, these are specific to this particular deal. All the numbers are in there. So that would change depending on what you want to do. So first thing you do is purchase sale. Second, you get an attorney in fact or limited power of attorney, right? Depending on the situation and the state, you can talk to a closer about this. But they're very similar documents. But this gives you the ability to sign for the seller regarding listing the property and novating once a buyer's found. Okay, so this is important because what you don't want is you agree to the situation and now you're having to have the seller do all the listing documents, review offers, do the entire realtor process. This gives you the ability to do it. And so in the specific document that we have on the drive, it says here that we have the specifically authorizes us to gives us permission to put the property on the MLS for the purpose of marketing and selling the property. It includes executing listing agreements, signing addendums, disclosures, seller contracts, everything else, right? And so this just basically gives us the right to go through that process, but doesn't take away their legal rights for the property. So we can't like go and steal the home from them or, sign up to put solar panels, do anything weird. It's a limited power of attorney that gives us the ability to do explicitly what's stated here and nothing else regarding the property, right? And so on this one too, what's important is as you go through this, you'd see it on like the sample that's on Notion, but we specifically say which property it applies to. So if there are concerns, if it's a landlord, those sort of things, and they don't want you to like be able to do this for their entire portfolio, it's specific to the property and the situation. Number 3 is a notice of interest. This is how you protect your interest in the property, right? Especially important if you're putting in any renovation or holding funds, if you're taking over their mortgage, paying off their water bill, you're paying off their taxes. Notice of interest, what it does, it allows you to record your interest in the property, similar to putting on a cloud on title, but you can do it from at a financial level, right? So you can say, we're going to be taking an interest for $15,000. This is a document that needs to get notarized, right? Otherwise, it becomes what's called a self-serving document, which title companies won't like, and lawyers technically won't like. But if you can get them to get this notarized, it will protect any financial interest in this property. It will also prevent them from selling it behind your back if you're concerned about that. All right. And then fourth one, it's a novation and indemnification agreement. And this is the one that you sign after your buyer's found. So after you go through, you put it on the market, or you just find your other buyer, however you want to do it. This is an entirely separate document that both you and the seller sign again. It terminates your obligations of the original PSA, and it basically explains the agreement of how the new PSA is going to work with the retail buyers, right? And so the most explicit parts on this here, just stating like on this one that the seller is going to actually a third-party real estate purchase agreement, so they understand they're now going to be taking on this new purchase agreement from their new borrower, and that the existing one is being terminated and everything that's coming with that, right? And so there's a handful of other things in that clause, in that contract. It's like a couple of pages, but this is one that both you and the seller sign, and this is what will allow the transaction with the new buyer to start moving forward. All right. So basically the step-by-steps here all laid out. The seller agrees to the price/process, signs a PSA. The attorney in fact is signed, which gives you the ability to go and advertise and find this third-party buyer. Notice of interest is signed and notarized. All these go to the title company, right? I should have added that in here as like step 3.5. Once you have all those done, they all go to the title company. Prop is listed on the MLS. If you're choosing to sell on the MLS, you can also do novations without going on the MLS. If you have like pocket buyers, things like that are retail. And that's all done by you, since you have the attorney in fact. So your seller shouldn't need to be signing any MLS docs or anything. You've done it correctly. Your third-party buyer is found. You and the seller sign the novation agreement. You work with the agent, buyer, and seller throughout the transaction to make sure everyone's kind of doing what they need. And then you get paid as a line item at the closing. This is where transparency is important, because your payment will show up on the line item on the seller side, right? So if it's something where they're walking away with no money and you promise them all this stuff and you're making 50 grand, they're going to see that. Okay. And so it's important that you're transparent with these things. Does that all make sense? Any questions on that? I'm going to move on to like the actual pitch piece here next.
What do you guys do about like disclosures from the seller to list the property on the MLS? I don't know if you have that in Washington, but
Yep. That's a standard thing. So basically, all the questions about the property, what's the utility, when was kitchen updated, has ever been a flood. I highly suggest you do that with the seller, right? If they're available to do it. Set up time, sit down with them, go through, and you can also do the typical realtor/investor thing. If there's anything that like, oh, I got to figure that out, don't know. That's why there's that box over there on the fourth column, right? So pitching innovation, make sure the seller's a match first off, right? And so we say the good kind of seller is going to be, they're put together, someone that, have a job, they know what they're doing, they're not a crackhead, right? They're not an absolute mess. You'll kind of know in your gut if they're not a good fit, right? They don't have a strict timeline. They could sell it next month or in 3 months. It doesn't really make any difference to them, right? Typically, they could sell the property retail or on the market, but they need assistance / want ease in the transaction. We do a lot of these with older people that like don't have anyone in their life to help them out. One of the ones, I have a little case study at the end of this, and literally it's a guy that's lived up here. His wife died. He's trying to move to Arizona. And the only thing that's stopping him from moving to Arizona is he has this house that needs a little bit of work and that he wants to get out of. Right. And he's like, I just don't really know how to do this. I don't know about it. He got like a couple quotes to fix things that were insane. He's like, I don't know why I should have to pay this. And so we're taking the deal over. He's already moved down to Arizona. And we're basically just handling it for him. Right. So those are the kind of people that you want. And then money is the main motivator. Right. If money is not a motivator, the cash purchase is typically going to be better. You know, if they need something a little bit quicker, or they're just like, I just want this thing off my hands. Even if you can make more money doing the novation, it's a service-based business, right? Do what's going to get the person the result that they need out of the transaction. So bad matches will be seller, the basket case / flight risk. There's somebody that every time you call them, you have to call them 87 times to get them on the phone. They don't respond to anything, right? Like you don't know where they are half the time. Sometimes they're like just not at their house for 4 days. You don't know why. Like you don't want to deal with that person, right? If there's complex legal hurdles in the transaction that you're predicting, probate, pre-foreclosure, divorce, those aren't good candidates for a novation, because what's going to happen is you're going to get a retail buyer who's coming in and is like ready to buy this house. And then you're going to face all the bullshit that we deal with on the wholesale side, but you're going to have a much less patient buyer. So make sure that those problems are solved if you're going to go this route. Seller has a deadline that's not negotiable. They need to close on a new house and they need the money. Sure, they might want retail price, but their closing is in 3 weeks. They need the money like by then. Not a good fit, right? They just got a new job in Wisconsin and they're moving here next month and they need to close before then. Not a good fit. You can't control it. With wholesale, you can control the timeline. That's kind of the value that we bring with a wholesale transaction. Okay. And then, or if the seller needs to remain in the house after closing, again, not a good fit. Some of you guys are agents on here. Jake, you're on my screen right now. How fun is it when you have a retail buyer that comes in and the seller's like, well, I need an extra 2 weeks to stay in my house? Doesn't fly with a retail buyer, like ever.
No, not without money.
Not without money. Exactly. Right. And so there'd have to be concessions. That's a whole other thing. But because you are the one that has the limited power of attorney on this, attorney in fact, you don't want to have to be making those decisions on behalf of the seller, having to open up those conversations. So it's best if it's a property that they're going to be out, doesn't have tenants, unless it's being sold as a rental property, right? And that part is very, very clear. Okay. When you're pitching it, keep it simple, right? Don't try to explain what a novation is. Like it's a legal term. You start to bring up things like that with people, their eyes glaze over. They're not real estate professionals. They don't care. We like to put labels on it. Equity protection program is Eric Brewer's thing. That's what he's always pitched it as. We've actually been saying our fix and list program, which has been working really well. We actually just started put together these new trifolds. And we actually got a deal off of these because we list our fix and list program in here. So our guy got one of these. He wasn't interested in our cash offer. He said he was looking at our trifold later and he wants to know what our fix and list program is. And we actually ended up getting the Novation signed around. Okay. So having just like a sales offer right around it that is better than like, oh, you know, we do this thing called the Novation. Basically, we partner up with you, like flip the house, blah, blah. Like that sounds like work. People don't want to do that. But if you have a designated program that you're a pro at, you know, it's your first one, it just feels better, right, to the seller. We like to pitch it as like a crazy idea after the wholesale offer fails. We always come in with a low price offer because the value of the wholesale offer or having the direct control of the contract, right, is you get completely unencumbered access to sell the contract, take control of the property, everything else. Once you do the novation, you kind of lose that, right? And so what we normally do with these, we always come with a wholesale offer. They don't like it, you know, don't want to accept it. They can't, whatever reason. Then we'll have like a crazy idea of like, well, we have this fix on this program thing. Okay. And so I have like a little blurb here that's similar to what Cody's done with people. Because you know what, we may be able to get you more money on the open market if you don't mind waiting through that process. I know the place needs a little bit of work. With our fix and list program, we can handle all the details and get you a top end price with no money or work required. Right. And so it's an offer for them. They understand it's going to take a little bit longer. It's not going to create any more work for them though. And that can be appealing, but we always can keep it as like a reserve thing. So do not pitch a novation just because there's resistance to your wholesale offer. This is probably the biggest issue I see with people that start to do this. I didn't realize how hard this is going to be when they're big either to read. Is this is really hard too when you guys bring on AMs and they start to get a little thirsty for commissions. Is as soon as a seller's like, oh, well, I don't really like your wholesale offer. They go, well, I have this thing. It's like a fix and list program. We make way more money. So let's just do that instead. Right? If you don't want to lose the deal, don't do that. Like you need to, this is where the experience and the discipline comes in, is you need to be sure that a wholesale offer does not make sense before you go down this route. Don't just do it as like I'm being lazy or I want to avoid hard conversations, right? Make sure that it's actually a net positive for you and the seller, not just you. So if it's something where they reject your offer and now you have this fix and list thing and they're going to basically come out the same, but you're going to make off like a bandit, that's crooked, right? Don't be that guy. That's what gets our industry regulated and ruins it for everybody. Okay. So ways you can structure them. So there's kind of a lot in this phase on this one, so you guys can review this on the recording. But there's a lot of different ways you can structure these kinds of deals. A lot of people tend to get some of these more than other ones, but there's a certain place for each one, right? So you can get a fixed fee for the service. So basically say like, we're going to carry you through this and you're going to pay us $10,000. You can do a fixed fee plus any additional profit, or say like, we're going to give you a floor price of 300 grand. You're going to pay us 10 grand minimum, plus we get everything else above that's remaining. You can do a fixed fee with split additional profit. So basically you get the 10 grand or whatever you decide, plus, everything above that you're going to split with the seller. That's a great way to incentivize them a little bit more to work with you on this. You can do no fixed fee. You get all the profits above the promised PSA price. So that's basically like, I'm going to give you 300 grand and everything above that is for me. You can do a no fixed fee with split profits above that. So you can say, we're going to give you 300 grand base, but everything above that, we're going to split 50-50. So you're going to make more money for dealing with this, right? And then you can do an adjusted fixed fee based on your time and materials. This is kind of like a GC way to approach things. This is probably the last choice for most of you guys. But if you are like a construction heavy person, you have crews and you're like trying to balance out the cost for that, you can run it kind of like similar to a GC where you will get paid for time and materials plus profit outside of the closing. This is what people do in high-end markets. If you've ever connected with any people that do like really high-end, like buy at 3 million, sell for 5 million, put $1 million into it type of deals, right? Probably even bigger than that. What they'll do is they will basically sub out a team that does all that work, and then they will get recomped plus profit through the sale, right? But there's lots of ways you can structure it. And the way that you need to go about it is what's going to be most mutually beneficial and appeals most to the seller, right? And so what I typically like are, if the deals are tighter, give yourself a fixed fee for the service. Or like if you're not as sure about the comps, write in your fixed fee so that you're going to get paid no matter what. And then if they're kind of like a stickler, you can do like a fixed fee plus, you split profit with them for bearing with you. If it's a deal that's like a little bit juicier, but you want to make sure that it's still ethical and everything else, the no fixed fee plus split profits can be a good way to go, because then you're going to be sharing in the upside with the seller equally, right? You just kind of need to like have this conversation with them and see what makes sense, and then sort of read the situation. And if you're unsure, if you're looking at these and like, I don't even know where to start, just write them in by putting in like a standard fixed fee for yourself, right? I think a good amount in most markets would be 10 to 15,000 for basically going through the process. Okay, so if you look at this and you're completely lost, that's why I would start, and then you can kind of explore the other ones as you go from there, right? That being said, if you're like in a lower price point market, some of you guys are in markets where homes exit at like 120, 130, fixed fee might need to be lower, or the profit splits might be a little bit more kosher on those, right? Questions you should be asking, and this is not to the seller, it's kind of like just in general about the process. What happens if an Novation property doesn't sell in the market? That can happen. We like to pretend like that will never happen. That can happen. We have seen this happen. We actually had one of these happen last year. Understand if that happens, that agreement is terminated. It now defaults back to your original PSA. So you were still bound by the terms and conditions in that PSA, and you may lose earnest money if you don't close at that price. Right? So understand that is the associated risk. What happens if a seller decides they don't want to sell or tries to sell to someone else? Sure, you've done all this documentation, everything else. Still can't control humans. They'll do weird stuff. That's where you're protected by the notice of interest. Make sure you record it, right? And if things get weird, you can pursue it. We actually have one right now where we are in the process of, we just served a seller that she's getting sued. And it's a real weird deal because we basically paid off her taxes for her. Then she ghosted us completely. So we had a notice of interest signed before that. And so we essentially recorded a lien on her. She got served. And then it's so funny how people get served lawsuits and then all of a sudden they're wanting to talk to us again. But our attorney's like, don't talk to her for at least 3 weeks because that's basically when the everything becomes official. Okay. So who pays the mortgage / what happens if the seller stops paying their mortgage or defaults? This is why you should only do this when you have good sellers, right? Don't do it with like heavily distressed people or kind of dirtbag people. Make sure it's mutually beneficial. And if the seller's in a hardship, so the very first novation that we ever did years ago, the seller was in a hardship, you may need to take over their payments. You can recomp those at closing, but understand that there might be additional carrying costs that come with doing these deals. So when in the case of that, when we did that one several years ago, we literally just logged onto his mortgage account and set it up so that it drew from our business bank account for the 3 months it took us to do the deal. Right? Because I guarantee you that if we hadn't, he probably would have defaulted on the loan. It would have caused more problems. And then lastly, is it okay that I'm making $50K on this novation and the seller's only making 10? Your ethics are your choice, right? Just like real wholesale real estate, if it feels slimy, it probably is, right? That's just sort of a good rule for life in general. All right, so a little case study. So it's kind of like a wall of text. I was struggling getting this one together before I hopped on. So this is one of the ones that we currently have. These are some photos of the property. Pretty retail property, right? And in Spokane, house needed minor exterior repairs and cosmetic cleanup. Estimated cost to do this is about 10 grand. ARV is 370K. After costs and repairs, the sale would net about 326. That's including the sales cost here, the excise tax, and the agent cost here in Spokane, as well as a 10K estimated repair cost. Seller retired and eager to leave the area. He has already bought a retirement home and just doesn't want to deal with his house anymore. Our wholesale price or wholesale sort of price was 260. And his response was, I'm not that desperate to sell this thing. He's like, I'll just deal with it if I'm going to take that much of a haircut. But he agreed to have us help fix and list the property and manage listings so he can go and move to Arizona. The floor price for the seller was 300K. Our minimum profit that we set was 10 grand because there are, it is a little bit tight and there are, some questions around the comps, especially with the neighborhood and everything else. So we basically wrote ourselves in a minimum of $10,000 regardless of the outcome. And then anything above $310,000 and us recouping our costs will split 50-50, right? So basically we're guaranteed $10,000 and to recoup our costs out of the bottom line. But anything above the $310,000 will split with the seller 50-50. If it sells for what we expect at 370, we should make about 20 grand, while the homeowner will make 55 to 60,000 more than our cash offer without having to do anything, right? And so plan for us is for us to paint the garage, fix up the house, and list it. If we were to have gotten it at 260, we'd probably get a wholesale it for like high 260s, 270, right? So it's going to take us a little bit longer, but we will make twice as much money. And then on the seller standpoint, he's going to make $55,000 or $60,000 more than if he would have accepted our offer. There's no timeline constraints. We're not going to take out debt. It's going to work out pretty well, right? It's very mutually beneficial all across the board. Make sense?
So did he give you like a bottom line, what he was looking for?
He did. Yeah, it was the classic one, Dave. You've had so many of these conversations. Like, I'm not taking anything less than 300. Right? It was just, he put that price out there. He originally wanted 320. And after we were at 260, he came in at 300. Because he had talked to an agent. He'd already kind of like done this math and figured out that that's where he would be. So we did have to talk him down a little bit. But other than that, he was open to the conversation. All right. And then I saw Drew walk away. When he comes back, I know he had a question. But a quick wrap up. They're a great strategy in a tight market where sellers can't just list a home and expect an easy sale. If you go back to like 2021, novations didn't really make a ton of sense because people could just like list cardboard boxes on the market and sell them for over asking price, right? Now there's a very legitimate population of people that are put together, people that have houses that are just less desirable, right? That they are going to need to sell, probably want assistance. People have gotten older, people looking to retire. So there's a population that exists right now for these, okay? You approach it as a service, not as a purchasing opportunity, and give sellers white glove treatment. Understand with this that it needs to be mutually beneficial and treat them that way. Like once you go into these, you are in bed with the seller until the deal goes through. It's not like a wholesale deal where as soon as the transaction closes, you're done, or a flip, as soon as the transaction closes, you're done with the seller. You're in it with them for the duration of this transaction, whether you like it or not. Okay. And then novations will affect your cash conversion cycle. So be smart about when you're using them and understand your full cash needs. It goes back to what I was saying at the beginning. Just because you have one that like seems decent, like if you're trying to do this deal and you're going to do all this work to make 20 grand, you have to decide if that's worthwhile to you. If you have nothing else on the table, sure. If you have like other opportunities you're trying to work and there's going to be a distraction, it probably doesn't make sense. Right. So just understand that and your needs for your business in line up what you need to do. Okay. All right, cool. What questions do you have? And Drew, I saw you had your hand raised before.
Yeah. Good presentation, man. There's a lot of really good stuff there, and I'm inclined to agree with most of it. I have a few thoughts, but my question is, and you may have answered this, when you have this scenario and a house needs a couple of things or rehabs done, are you doing the rehabs before you put it on MLS?
That's a good question.
Are you proactive?
So the ones that we've done, we have the one that we had that had like significant work that we did a couple years ago. We did the work before we put on the MLS. Okay. I kind of like your thought though of, is there like a way you can almost like pre-sell it or almost find like a retail buyer that's okay with like the situation?
Yeah.
There's definitely an opportunity.
Yeah, you're reading my mind because that's exactly how we do it. The way that we do it is, first of all, to know whether or not it's a novation, it's a mathematical thing right out of the gate. Like you're going to try to wholesale it or buy it for cash. Mm-hmm. And if that price isn't good enough for them, then there's a novation offer that you can try to help them get that's a little bit higher. Right. So like these groups that do like all novations, they can't possibly be trying to find the best outcome for the seller.
They're definitely not. Yeah, it's not.
They're definitely not. So that said, the way that at least we do it, and this doesn't make it right or wrong, but we've had a lot of success with it, is we'll go talk to that seller. Our wholesaler, our cash number just doesn't make sense for them. And we say, okay, what do you need to get out of it? Mm-hmm. Right? Like maybe I'd give them 180 cash. That's no good. They have to get to 200. Like maybe that's their payoff is 195 or something. Like they have to get to 200 and the house is worth 250, but it needs 10 grand in work, something like that. So get out of here. So what we will do is we will set everything up for a novation, but we put it straight on the MLS. Most of the time without touching most of it. We might tweak one or two things. Like if the roof is pouring water in the house, okay, we're going to at least patch it or something. But we list it with like a clause or a statement that says we will provide up to $5,000 or $10,000 in inspection required concessions. I forget exactly what we call it, but when someone wants to buy it, like say that just dogs tore up the carpet. The rest of the house is beautiful, but it needs carpet all the way throughout. So that's going to be $7,000. Okay, well, we're going to list it as is. So we're not putting our money into it first. And we will offer, up to $7,000 worth of inspection required repairs. Mm. And so then when it goes under contract, they know that we're going to be on the hook. And then once we've got the contract, everyone's agreed, then we'll put that money in to do those rehabs. And so the risk of being out the money up front goes down exponentially.
Yeah, that's interesting. You're almost giving them like a, buyer inspection insurance policy, right? It's like
That's
if it happens, like we'll cover the cost.
Well, and that's exactly what it is. And that's where most of these sellers, that's where they need the help, because they have a good house with good equity where, yes, they could list it themselves, but they don't have the 10 to bring to the table to fix all that carpet, or to, brace the basement because they've got a broken support beam or something like that. So what we do is because the toughest thing with Novations is trying to convince people, well, why wouldn't you just list it yourself?
Yeah.
This is the problem that we need to fix for them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So we come in, we tell them, we're going to fix this problem. We'll still get you your number. We net the difference, but we're still fixing their problem. And that's the crux of how a Novation, in my opinion, should work, is you're helping to fix that problem.
Yeah. That makes sense. It's funny. I guess the ones that we've done, we haven't had any like major CapEx items, right? Or anything like that that's a concern. It's always been like kind of cosmetic stuff, right? So the larger one that we did a couple years ago, the big thing was he had like basically half finished the basement. He already like framed it in and drywalled it and stuff. But he hadn't like finished the drywall or painted it or done carpet. So we basically just came in, we did all that. It cost us like 20 grand, which we recovered. But the guy was like literally had gotten divorced, was in like a pre-foreclosure and was just trying to get out of the situation as fast as he could. And so we put up the money on that and basically just recorded a lien. But that act increased the value of the property by like 100 grand, right? Like going through that process, yep. Essentially doubled the square footage, and I think the thing is, and then what we did with that one is when we sold it above our scratch price, we split our profit with him 50-50. And so we ended up making like 50K, and the seller made like an extra like 100 and something thousand based off of whatever we were going to offer. Right. So it was super mutually beneficial. But I think a big point of what you're saying there too, Drew, is it's so case specific, right? And that's where these get kind of weird. And like, you really need to figure out what the seller needs in order to set up the best possible scenario. And then probably too, what you need to, in order to get what you can. Because in your case, if you can avoid putting in the $7,000 in carpet and still sell it for the same price, like why wouldn't you do that?
The other thing, I guess, that I would put out there is, for us, like we've got a spreadsheet that our AMs use to calculate all of their, what they should be offering. And we've built novations into that, right? So they can see what I want them to offer if it's a wholesale. And I want you to start at, you anchor here, and then here's 4 offers to ratchet up. But then if that's not it, well, then here's the novation numbers. So they don't have to, get off the phone and then come back to us and brainstorm about it. Like, they've got a pretty good idea of, and they float the idea and say, we'll have to check with management, but if I could do this for you, they just got all the numbers right there, which has been a game changer.
How much do you bet the seller on that? Like, you're not gonna do that if it's like a crackhead.
Probably not.
Everyone's
how much do we?
You just don't see that.
Yeah, it's a lot more meth here than crack, but that's a good question. How often do we vet the seller? Most of the time, if they're truly like, there's drugs involved or major disarray in their life, the house is so far gone that you're going to buy it for cash, or it's an absolute dumpster fire. We're probably talking about someone who got sick with cancer, or someone whose spouse just ran out on them, and they've got a good house and a decent life. Otherwise, they're just kind of in a pinch and it's time to move back home somewhere. They just don't have, like, someone broke 6 of their windows and they don't have the money to put it together, or, something squirrely like that.
Totally. Yeah. Similar sort of situations. Right. Yeah. It's so hard. It's so dependent. Right. But no, man, I appreciate all the insights on that. So when you do your profit on these, Drew, I'm just curious how you do these before you move your office format or whatever you're doing over there. Do you structure it where basically you have a floor price and then you're getting everything above that, or do you do like a fixed fee model, or what's your setup?
I mean, it's basically a conversation with them about, what do you need, right? Like, my cash offer of X isn't going to be a good fit for you. So tell me what you need and let me find a way to help you get it. Okay. And when they share that with us, if my 180 doesn't work and they come back and say, I have to have 200. Okay. Here's a way that I'm pretty sure I can get that for you. And, again, we use this in a scenario where they could put it on the market themselves, but they need to address this one issue. And we address that issue for them.
Cool. I like that. Solution to share.
But to answer your question,
yeah.
We get everything above what they need.
Yeah.
Yep. So we're all agreed up front, and we have open discussions about, listing it with our realtor and going through showings, and you'll have to come to the closing table. And it's 100% transparency, because without it, you're just setting yourself up for failure.
So you still have them go to the closing table. You don't take the power of attorney.
I'd have to double check with Joel on how we do that.
Yeah.
But I think the simple answer is yes, because to novate something really means to replace one thing with something else, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we come in, we put a contract in place, we get them to the finish line, and then the new buyer's contract novates ours, and we essentially remove ourselves from it for a fee at the closing table and let the seller and buyer do their thing.
Interesting. Yeah, because we intentionally have that that power of attorney so that we can do all that process for them. They don't have to do it. Then we don't have to worry about being the middleman to get them addendums or extensions or all the other stuff. But yeah,
that's good feedback. I'll have to double check, because again, my guy handles most of it for us.
Yeah.
But that might be a difference in our process.
Yeah. Just it avoids any delays when people do weird things.
Yeah.
So, cool. Appreciate all that feedback, dude. It's awesome. What you got, Carl?
You might have answered this already, and this is for Drew as well, but what is it? Do you have the novation added into the calculator somewhere?
Drew does on his calculator. We don't have one on ours, I don't think.
You don't have one on yours, Mike?
No.
Drew, is there any way you could share that with the group, or?
I basically took the scale community flipping calculator, and I've juiced it up a bunch because I'm a dork and I like doing that kind of stuff.
Me too.
But yeah, Mike, if you can help me remember, I'll be happy to post it. I just sent it to Dylan just yesterday because he wanted it for a project. So happy to share.
Cool. Yeah, appreciate
Thanks,
it.
man. Appreciate that, Drew.
Yeah, no sweat.
But, all right, guys. Any more questions on these novations to wrap up?
Yeah, I just got a quick question. So when you're analyzing as far as why a seller would want to do a novation, would it be I know they're all seem to be fairly unique, kind of piecing things together, but is it more often than not that there's work that needs to be done for them to to get a higher price or get the price they need, or they and you can sell them on a way for them to net what they are saying they want, or a higher price, or is it just that they just don't want to deal with a realtor? They just kind of don't want, they kind of like the idea of somebody helping them with this stuff.
Yeah. So kind of all the above what you just said. And I think a key thing, and Drew said this very specifically this way, it's not about what they want, it's about what they need. So you go off of what they want, it's always going to be more, right? If you ask me what I want for my property, I will happily sell you my home for $1 million right now. It's not worth that. I would love that if you did that, but it's not what I need to move on. And so when it comes down, it still needs to be a motivated seller in the way that they are indeed looking to sell the property, right? And it's something that they are certain that they want to do. And then when you go through and you're figuring out, the wholesale price isn't going to work for them because it's not going to meet their needs. If there's an extended timeline, what is the price that they would need in order for you, in order for them to move? And does it make sense for you to do a novation at that price? Right? Because it's possible they're still going to need too much, or in order to get that much, there's going to be too much needs to go into the property in order to get to that point.
I mean, a lot of times we ask the question, have you thought about, is there a reason you're not listing the property to the realtor? Yeah. I mean, is that would still be a valid question in this case, or would you? It's almost like you feel like you wouldn't want to say it. I
think that's a great question, right? Why is there a reason you haven't just listed it yourself right now?
Yeah.
Oh well, I know that it's gonna. I don't want to have to deal with all of that, right? I don't have to deal with all the inspections. I know they're going to find this crack in the foundation,
So in other words, if we could show you a way that you could get what you need and not have to deal with all of that, that we could help you out with all of that. Was that something that would make sense to talk about?
Yeah. I think in your market, especially Dave, doing stuff down there in SoCal, there's probably a decent number of opportunities for stuff like this. There's probably a lot of guys down there that do these, that are like these higher end realtors, especially if you're getting out and like into Newport Beach where the properties are very, very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
But we're going to add something on that, Drew?
I was just going to say, I mean, the question was, would you not want to ask the question about why don't you list this with a realtor? You have to ask that question because you have to get to the other side of the answer, regardless of what it is. So it'd be better for you to bring that question up so that you can coach them through that in an honest way, not a manipulative way, but an honest way to get to the other side of that. Or you're going to pitch them on it. You're going to walk away and they're going to go tell their aunt about it. And their aunt is like, look, I'm a realtor. Let me just list it for you. Right. And if you haven't gone through the mechanism of why haven't you just called a realtor, you need to hear what that answer is and then help them understand what you bring to the table.
Right. Yep.
Because most people look at novations and say they're stupid. It doesn't make sense. Why would anyone do that? Because all they see is you listing it on the MLS. If that's all your novations are, then that is stupid. And they should be asking you that question. What you bring to the table is there's something getting in the way of them sending it to market.
Mm-hmm.
You need to figure out what it is. And then you need to be the one to help build that bridge to get across it to the other side. And you're going to get paid for that value. That's it.
It's a good response.
So ask that question.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Thanks.
All right, guys. What's that, Dave? One more thing?
Oh, I was just going to say, seems like being honest about stuff just seems to work a lot of the time, right?
It does. More often than not. Wouldn't you believe that? If you're honest and transparent with people, typically it leads to easier conversations.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, guys. Well, thanks for coming today. You guys have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you guys later.